Ladies and gentlemen, one thing you must know is, when it comes down to education, textbooks are all written and distributed to the entire country from Texas. Now, do I agree with that? No, I don't believe all of the history should be isolated from one location in the country. And you got to also look at who is writing this history. Of course, the people are not going to look like us. We know that right off the bat. Look, even the people that are labeled as Native Americans in this country says these folks do not tell their history right. So, that being said, remember the last time we had history come out of Texas, ladies and gentlemen, they were the ones that tried to change chattel slavery and slaves to migrant workers that came over here to work for free. Look, don't no damn body want to work for free today, and nobody wanted to work for free back then. So, but this lie, y'all, that's the lie that came out of Texas in the textbooks. And I'm just glad that a lot of parents were paying attention and shut that mess down. And they had to go back in and revise it, but they tried to get away with it. The fact that they tried said a lot. It's amazing how they have no problem discussing any history. But when it comes down to our history, all of a sudden there's all kinds of issues. You know why? Because, ladies and gentlemen, they think this history makes them look bad. I don't give a damn about how these people look. You tell the history the right way or don't tell it at all. I really truly believe that parents need to control the history that is taught to your children. You teach it. Don't let history just be up in the schools. When your kids get home, tell them the truth about America. Tell them the truth about racism. Tell them the truth about chattel slavery and Jim Crow and Reconstruction and the civil rights movement and mass incarceration and the crack of it. You tell your kids that. You control the narrative. It can easily be done. You cannot depend on your enemy to tell your story the correct way. They're just not going to do it. And they have showed us they're not going to do it. I mean, shoot, when I was in school, they didn't want to say nothing beyond Harriet Tubman, Crispus Attucks, Martin Luther King, and they didn't talk nothing about Malcolm X, you know, and they talked about, a little bit about the Underground Railroad and a little watered down version of slavery, because slavery was far worse than what they wrote in these books. It was far worse than that. And you don't need to get this information from these folks anyway. Listen to some of the slave narratives and read a lot of the quotes that came directly from the slaves. That'll give you more of a roadmap to what happened back then. White people ain't going to tell you the truth. They only going to water down as much as possible because they know how bad they look in the whole thing. So you can't rely on these people to say anything good. Look, even the Native Americans say all the history that they've told on them, they're full of shit. And ain't none of that shit is true. But you know how it is. When you are conquered, then the winner tells the history. And of course, they're going to always tell that history in a way where they look good in the whole thing. And if there's certain parts of the history where they don't look good, well, they're going to try to change it and water it down and make it seem like it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Yes, it was. It was worse. So parents must be in charge of any history taught. There's no way around it. So this came out in the Dallas Morning News. Texas African American Study course expected to move forward despite concerns of watering down. So they are taking some people out and adding some people in. And it really depends on how they do this. Now, because Texas writes the textbooks for the rest of the country, I know a lot of this is pertaining to Texas, but eventually it is going to end up in the hands of your children as far as this history that comes out of the schools, which is horrible history, by the way. It's horrible. Texas African American Studies course expected to move forward despite concerns of watering down. Discussions of amendments to the course standards brought up some concerns about how expansive the class would be, but the course continued to have widespread support. So, this is Texas ISD's African American Study course is closer to becoming a statewide elective, despite some concerns that would present a watered down history. The State Board of Education will vote Friday on standards for districts to offer the course as an elective social studies class for high school students while discussing amendments to the standards at a Tuesday meeting. The board mostly offered minor edits, but some members raised questions about the scope of the course. If the amendments are approved on Friday, the course will stay on track to becoming Texas' second ethnic study course. The first one is Mexican Americans, and then African Americans would follow in in the second place for ethnic studies. But the African American Studies course has garnered widespread support, and the board signaled in November that it intends to give it a final approval in April. So it can be adopted by other districts as soon as next fall. So, parents, you must pick up those books and read what they got to say about any kind of Black history. Because I can tell you, Black history in this country is horrible. The best history I learned was on my own, picking up books and studying and reading myself. That's the best history lesson I got. I didn't get no good history lesson from these white female teachers in the school. And I can assure you, your kids ain't getting no good lesson from them either. The course being taught in 16 ISD schools. And this is in Dallas for the first time this academic year, according to Shalon Bond, Director of Social Studies for the district. The Dallas ISD curriculum focuses on contributions of African civilizations and African Americans beyond the context of slavery or the Civil War. And you know what they really need to teach? They need to teach the pre-Columbus history of this country. I'm not even interested in what happened after 1492. A lot of that mess that we're taught is not even the truth anyway. We need the pre-Columbus history. You know, it's amazing how the rest of the world learns international history. And here in this country, they don't want to take you beyond American history. That says a lot right there. They don't want to take you beyond American history. You know, see, you will learn a lot beyond this history, because if you learn international history, you'll learn that white people were slaves over there in Europe. They were slaves and they were putting each other up on auction blocks and selling each other over there. Okay. That's why I laugh when they sit around talking about Black people sold other Black people in slavery. White people did the same thing. That's why y'all won't teach international history, because you don't want your history and all the slavery and the barbarianism stuff and the dark ages and everything that happened to you. You don't want that out there. That's why you don't want to teach anything prior to 1492, because you know how bad your history really looks. And they also don't want to teach you the people that came over here, ladies and gentlemen, from Europe. They were criminals, prostitutes, and all kinds of people that were jailed. All they did when they sent these people over, they cleared out their jails. Okay, that's all they did. Clear out the jails, send the riffraff over here, and in places like Australia, and that's what Europe did. They got rid of these people because they didn't want them. But they won't teach you that part of their history. They want to teach you all the bullshit, and on top of that, lying about it too. So, most of the board edits to the standards on Tuesdays focus on clarifying or broadening language. For example, they voted to change language requiring students to analyze the influence of Harriet Tubman to instead have students analyze the Underground Railroad more broadly. Well, there's no way to detach Harriet Tubman from the Underground Railroad. She is very much part of that, but she by far is not the only one that was involved in it. It was a lot of people involved in it. In fact, there's a family up here in my state called the Stills. The Stills, they hid a lot of slaves, a lot of them. In fact, when they ran up here, that's exactly where they went. And they would give them clothes, food, help them get housing, help them get jobs. And they were a huge part of the Underground Railroad when it came down to this family up in the north. In fact, my grandmother's oldest sister married one of the Stills. So, so they are part of my family. But let's move on. Since we brought the Underground Railroad, we took Harriet Tubman because she's part of it, but it was more than her, Bond said. But the discussion during the public hearing centered on how many figures students should be required to know. The nonprofit Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services asks for the board to consider adding 7 more notable figures in the areas of environmental justice. But see, here's my problem. If you add Black people that were environmental justice rebels, then what happens to our more militant people like Nat Turner? Does he get wiped out because you're adding in these environmental justice, safe Negroes? It is important for students to understand the changes in continuity in African American history and be presented with the opportunity to explore the legacy and the influence of scholars, activists, and community leaders. Nalili Hidalgo, education liaison for the nonprofit. Tom Maynard, a Florence Republican, asked if additions to the course would be too much for teachers to teach in 1 year. If we continually adding things to the standards, we wind up where we wind up with a lot of social study courses where the sheer volume of the content really precludes us from teaching the death, he said. Well, I'm just wondering, if you add these people, who gets struck out of the history? That's all I'm asking. And they seem to be kind of vague on that in the article. Lawrence Allen Jr., a Democrat representing Houston, said he has received questions about whether more revolutionary African American figures will be cut out in an attempt to broaden the standards. That's what I want to know. Okay, so you're adding in several African Americans that were more into environmental things. So, what happens to the more revolutionary African American figures? Do they get written out because you're adding these others in? There is a great fear in Houston that we are presenting a watered down course on African American studies, Allen said. They feel like those who are more revolutionary may not be as included because we want to be kind of appease others in the course. No. So what they're trying to say is, You put the more environmental type of Black Negro in the history. And because you got them in, you take the revolutionary ones out because that makes white people feel better. So, anyway, to your point about it being watered down, at least we have the water, she said. Well, I don't agree with her. So, if you're going to add let's say somebody in and then you're going to take Nat Turner out, then to me that's a problem. No, I don't care about you having the water. You either tell the history right or go somewhere and shut up. Bond said teachers could be provided with a list of optional figures to discuss in addition to required ones. But she added that the goal of the course is to set students on a path to explore more on their own. Denmark VC, do he get written out? I mean, seriously. So if you take them out, so they don't hear about the revolutionary kind of history that we definitely have. I agree that some of this will be an introduction, but it should also light a fire to want to know more because they're learning about themselves, she said. It makes me wonder. I'm now curious to know who's on these boards that are selecting the information on what goes into these school history books. I mean, we really should know more about these people. We don't know enough about them. And it's always been such a big mystery about who is making these final decisions on the history. But y'all, please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.